Welcome to the video for Chapter 11, Lessons 5 and 6, Circumference and Area of Circles. How can the radius and diameter be used to find the area and circumference of circles? Let's go ahead and get some vocabulary. The circumference is the distance around the circle. It's a circle's perimeter. It is measured in units because it is distance. The formula is C, a capital C for circumference, equals 2 times pi times r. 2 times r, twice the radius, is the length of the diameter. So your choices are either to enter in 2 pi r or just pi times the diameter. It ultimately depends on what information you are given. For pi, we can use the symbol on the calculator or 3.14. For area is the number of square units that can fit inside the circle. The formula for area is area equals pi r squared. So notice that the 2 is an exponent because the radius is being squared. It is not the same thing as being multiplied by 2. And again, you can use 3.14 instead of the pi button. Please understand that this is a rounded answer, and so therefore your final answer would be even more rounded. Let's go ahead and find the circumference and area of the circle below. Recognizing, please, that the 8 meters is the radius because it's going from the center to a point on the circle. That would mean that the radius going in the other direction would also be 8. So that means that the diameter is 16. 8 plus 8, or 2 times 8 would be our diameter. So for the circumference, it's either pi times the diameter, or it is 2 pi r. Now in this problem, technically we were given the radius first, so I probably would just grab my calculator and do 2 times pi times 8. Understanding, of course, that we could use 3.14. It really just depends on what you're used to in the calculator. Both answers will be accepted for this lesson. Depending on which form of pi you used, your answer would be 50.24 or 50.27. And again, this label is in meters. Using the formula for area, I'm going to go ahead and use both pi for pi 8 squared. And actually I prefer pi times 8 squared, put my little multiplication symbol there. Or area equals 3.14 times 8 squared. I'll tell you that when I'm writing it, I always use the symbol pi because using 3.14 just takes too long to write. I will always use the symbol pi. And honestly, my calculator just kind of depends on if I feel like getting the pi symbol or not. So for using the pi symbol, it is 201.06 meters squared. Using 3.14, it is 200.96 meters squared. So just to compare, our circumference is the distance around. So if you were to walk around the circle, it would be a distance of just over 50 meters to get from here whole way around back to here again. But the area is the space in the middle. So that is going to be 200. So there's just over 200 square meters that can fit inside the circle. So that's why the numbers are different. It does make a difference if you are squaring the 8 or multiplying it by 2 when you are finding the circumference or area of the circle. Ultimately, whenever you are finding area of a circle, it's really just about you remembering the formula and how to use it and making sure that you are plugging it into the calculator correctly. In this example, the 14 is the radius, so I'm going to do pi times 14 squared. Now again, ultimately, I always use the pi symbol in showing my work, but in the calculator, I will use either one, and Canvas for your practices will accept either version. So area will equal 615.75 kilometers squared, or 615.44 kilometers squared. Now, this top answer is when I use the pi symbol. This bottom answer is when I use 3.14. This I did have to round, so please practice typing this in your calculator. Compare it to the pi symbol to 3.14. There's definitely a simplicity with just using 3.14 because I did not have to round this decimal any further. It was 615.44. I did have to round the 7.5 to the nearest hundredth for whenever I use the pi symbol. So just some things to decide between whenever you are working. Go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. 6.2 is going to be the radius because it is the length from the center to a point on the circle. So again, we're finding area. Area equals pi r squared. So go ahead, pause the video, find the area. Hoping that you took 6.2 and squared that, multiplying it by the pi symbol or 3.14. It's 120.76 or 120.7 miles squared for both. This is the word problem. It says when ordering pizza by inches, that measurement references the pizza's diameter. If you order a 24-inch pizza, what is the pizza's area? So what's interesting about this is that it is the distance across the pizza, and so we're really trying to figure out how much pizza you're actually going to eat when we're answering how much area it is. But when you are given the pizza's diameter, that means that we have to divide it by 2 to find that the radius is 12. When you are finding area, there is only one formula. It is pi times r squared. It is not like the circumference where you could keep it as a diameter number because you're just going to end up taking the radius and multiplying it by 2. This is taking the radius and squaring it. So when you are finding area, you must have the radius. Plugging in pi times 12 squared. Again, depending on which method of pi you use, which form of pi you use, you get 452.16 inches squared or 452.39 inches squared. If you do plug this one into your calculator, and this is the one that uses the pi symbol, you will get 0.3893421, and maybe even a little further depending on your calculator. Please understand that you must round correctly, and as you can see, I've been rounding to the nearest hundredth simply because when we use pi as 3.14, we round to the nearest hundredth, so we just try to keep with that pattern and stay consistent. Now we're going to move on to problems involving circumference. So remember that these are the problems that are answering how far around the circle or how far you would be walking around the circle. So the distance around the circle. These formulas are either 2 pi r or pi times d, because remember that the diameter is twice the radius, so it's either or because it's ultimately depending on what you are given. In this problem, we are given that the radius is 14, so I'm just going to plug in 2 times pi times 14. And again, depending on if you use the pi symbol or 3.14 in your calculator, your answers will vary just on the decimal. So your answers should be just under 88 kilometers for the distance around this circle. Given that this is really just about formula use, again, C equals 2 pi r or C equals pi times diameter, go ahead and pause the video. Find the circumference of this circle with the radius of 6.2. When using the formula, you should get 38.96 miles or 38.94 miles, depending on which value you used for pi. In this word problem, we are asked to find the circumference of the Earth if the diameter of the Earth is 12,750 kilometers. So in this example, we are given the diameter. So I am just going to use the C equals pi times D formula. So pi times 12,750, and we're going to calculate that out. Using 3.14, you actually get a very even 40,035 kilometers. If you use the pi symbol, it's 40,055.31 kilometers. So this ends up being quite a bit further off by about 20 kilometers. Please understand that using the pi symbol is more accurate because you're not rounding until the very end. Rounding in the middle of the problem or at the beginning of the problem is going to make your answer less and less accurate. So if we're just having a general discussion about the diameter of the Earth, or the circumference of the Earth rather, we would say that it's just about 40,000 kilometers for the circumference of the Earth. But if we had to use it to actually do some calculations, very important calculations, scientific calculations, we would want to use the most accurate answer using the pi symbol. Extension problems dealing with circumference and area normally revolves around being given one of them, either the circumference or the area, and having to find the other one. So in this case, it says we are given the circumference of a wheel that is 34.54 inches, and we are finding the area. So when we are given the circumference, C equals 2 pi r. I don't know why with the circumference, that's just always the formula that I use. Generally, I guess it's because, especially if I have to find area, then I need the radius anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this formula. But this is the circumference, 34.54. So that's what's going to be plugged in for C. So 34.54 is going to equal 2 pi r. Now, the goal is to solve for r, so I need to divide both sides by 2 pi. Now, that might look a little funny, and you really have to be very careful whenever you are plugging that into your calculator. Because if you don't do it correctly, it could really mess up. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use the 6.28, and that's what I'm divided by. And what 6.28 is coming from is 2 times 3.14. I am going to go ahead and just use the rounded version for pi in this case, just so my numbers don't get crazy 20 million times over. So 2 times 3.14 is 6.28. So that is what I'm dividing by. And it just leaves me with r on the right-hand side. And then 34.54 divided by 6.28 is going to give me a nice 5.5, in this case, inches for my radius. Now, that doesn't actually answer the question. We are supposed to find the area, but now I have pi times 5.5, which needs to be squared. And just to be consistent, I am going to go ahead and use the 3.14 instead of the pi symbol, again, just for consistency in the problem. So 94.99, actually, it's 985. And maybe even just say approximately 95 inches squared, or 95 square inches. So we are given the circumference. I use that in a formula to solve for r. We could have divided by 2 and then divided by pi, but I just took care of 2 pi in one division by really simplifying 2 times pi first to get 6.28. So dividing both sides by 6.28, got the radius to be 5.5. Plug that in for the formula for area. So that's what an extension problem could look like. The area formula, if I was given the area, we just have to square root, divide by pi, and then square root some things, so it could be a little trickier, but that's what these extension problems are going to look like. So in this case, in this extension problem, we have the area of a silo. So the area equals pi times the radius squared. So in this case, the area is 706.5. That's going to equal pi r squared. So we're talking about silo on a farm. These are those big, tall, round buildings that often hold corn. So the average area, and so we're talking about area, it's just the floor, like the ground space that it's taking up. So to solve for the radius, I'm going to divide by 3.14 on both sides. That will cancel out my pi, and I'm going to end up with what r squared equals. And using 3.14 exactly, I get 225 exactly without having to do any rounding. So that's very nice. And so then whenever I find the square root of that to figure out what r is, it's a nice even 15. So that will often be the case. So whenever you are solving for r, just go ahead and use 3.14 instead of the pi symbol. So we get the radius as 15. If I want to know the circumference, and knowing the circumference of the silo would be helpful in case we need maybe to replace some siding on the silo going around it. Maybe we want to plant flowers around it. Maybe we want to put a little fence around it. Whatever the case may be, we're trying to figure out the distance around the silo now. So we're just going to do 2 times 3.14 times 15, or 3.14 times 30. Again, whichever formula for circumference you'd like to use. So it is 94.2 feet. The radius is 15 feet. The circumference is just the distance, so it is 94.2 feet for the silo. This concludes the video for Chapter 11 Circles about circumference and area. So how can the radius and diameter be used to find the area and circumference of circles? Well, for area, you have to have the radius. It's pi times r squared. For the circumference, it's either the radius or the diameter, 2 times pi times r or pi times d. These formulas are the same. It's just whether or not you are given the radius or the diameter, which formula you'd like to use. Thanks for watching.